Sharon is currently the chair of the ECC, which is the Environmental Concerns Committee for the city. She's involved with various environmental groups throughout the community. Today, she's going to be talking to us about ModeShift. What is it? What their goals are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sharon, take it away. It's all yours.
Yeah, so I've been a part of ModeShift a little while now. It's kind of like a collection of different people interested in a variety of topics, with a main goal of like more equitable, um, basically transportation for non-single occupancy car users, and centering around people. Um, so yeah, I guess I have a bunch of questions I was basically going to answer, but also if you have questions, I don't mind not waiting till then. There's a small enough
Okay.
group, if you have questions in between. But I got involved because I've been working towards trying to be in a single car household for a while now, and trying to use the car less, trying to um, basically be able to um, get to everything I need to, without needing to always constantly rely on a car, which is what so much of our society, and community is set up as. Um, and yeah, 10 years ago, it's was even harder. And I feel like locally, we've been seeing some shifts towards making that more and more possible. And I kind of want to talk about the importance of that for a climate future. Um, but yeah, basically, it's not a full like membership group, so anyone can go to any of the meetings. There's like some kind of board-esque meetings, and then also all sorts of different events like community bike rides. They've done a bunch of, I think I've only participated in one of them where they bike together to the night market, and just kind of showing the infrastructure for how it is and how it can be better. Um, One of the big ways that ModeShift is present in the community is a discussion page basically on Facebook. So if any of you are on Facebook, and you're interested, I'd highly recommend joining that and seeing, like, you're able to always see what events are happening, um, and it's a really great place to discuss specific issues that you've seen throughout the community when you've been trying to get around, not just by car. So there's all sorts of different focuses that ModeShift is interested in, and a lot of what we've been able to do is based off of who's interested in actually doing the things. Maybe y'all are used to that in some in some of your groups too. Um, but yeah, a lot of people think of us as only like cyclists, but really I got started by majority loving to walk everywhere. I used to live even closer to downtown. I was 2 blocks from City Hall. I was constantly, I know I've run into like a lot of you at different events in the community that were downtown and walkable. So I really always saw myself first as a mode shifter of liking the option of walking first, but now I have definitely become a cyclist as well, and they've encouraged me in other ways too. Um, Another thing for mode shift is a large percent of the population doesn't have access or can't drive a car. So lots of vulnerable populations that have different kinds of visual impairments that you can't necessarily drive, but you can see well enough to bike around and get around in other ways. People that aren't old enough to drive a car, and people that no longer have the ability to drive as they age. So there's all sorts of different types of community members, outside of just who can't afford a car, which is also a growing issue. There are so many people that that affects, but there's more and more things that we need to think about for how we can get the community able to get to their needs without focusing on cars in such a car-centric society. So another thing that I would love to say is, in environmental circles, there's a lot of discussion of electric vehicles, and I know there's some enthusiasts in here. And I think there's a place for all of these different things, but I think it's really important and a huge problem to solve to fix our infrastructure to not rely on just cars as the future. So I do think there's a place for electric vehicles, but I think that too much emphasis has gone on that over other ways of transportation, like increasing our bus frequency and locations for where they're able to go. The amount of jobs that you can get on the bus line in hours operating for the bus line is very discouraging if we don't focus on getting that better. And that's a big barrier for people having stable jobs and being able to get around without relying on needing to have a car. So there's the more if you're able to use it, the more you're able to make the system better. So that's one thing I've been really focusing on the last couple years. I have like unofficially been a one car household with my partner this whole year. So he has a car technically, but it hasn't been functioning for this whole entire year because we've been able to get around that. But that's not a choice that everyone has. But if you have the choice, I highly recommend um, testing out the bus network for how it is for when you're able to use that as a way to show your support and get more money into that system. But anyway, I've said a little bit of a lot of things. Are there any questions up front right now? Seeing more and more faces.
I would love to hear what ModeShift does, how how to encourage more bus lines and greater coverage, more buses. Is there an advocacy angle to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I feel like one area that we could improve a lot on is specifically helping with increasing the bus schedule. That's something I've personally been definitely increasing my use on the last year. It's been like my goal to try out all of the different lines and see if I have reasons to go to some of them. Some of them I honestly haven't yet. But I've been able to get all around different places that if you just plan ahead, you're able to do that. But your question, how well organized are we for that area? Not, I think there's room for improvement, so I can't really say anything specifically that I know we've done. Um, I do know that the Metro group came to a bike event in Bronson Park where ModeShift also was, and other different bike advocacy groups and adjacent groups. And they were showing people how easy it was to put your bike on the bike rack for the buses. So I felt like that was one really cool way to get some more people thinking about like, oh, well, I could just take my bike if the bus gets close enough and then have something to fall back on if you're nervous about bus schedule or anything like that. Unfortunately, something I've also noticed um, since COVID started is the bus schedule is like worse than it used to be. So it's not open as late. There's driver shortage has also been an issue off and on. I think like throughout a lot of the country, which is super unfortunate. I feel like they have an awesome starting wage. So if you know anyone interested in bus driving, that would be one barrier towards increasing the lines. But another one is just proving that there's the need there is a huge thing. Um, so yeah, I'll push for that. I know there are a few other bus enthusiasts for sure in ModeShift, but I can't think of something we've specifically done to encourage that expansion more besides just encouraging general use. Definitely the discussion board, I'll mention again, as one of the great community ways to connect for ModeShift on Facebook. There's a lot of I got help figuring out how I could do my commute for the last job I was in. It was 4.5 miles away. But I was like, hey, how do I connect safely via a bike from my neighborhood to basically near the Kalamazoo airport? And it took some logistics, because that was one barrier I had to like figure out what a make sense way to bike to work would be. And those kinds of specific local discussions are something I feel like it's really helpful for helping encourage people to use other modes, basically. Any
There
other
was,
questions?
yeah, there was a guy that I talked to at one of the fairs on the campus, and they were developing a bicycling map. Do you tie in with that at all? Are you
Do you know who
aware
that
of
was
it?
by chance?
No,
And you
I
know it
thought
was a
it.
ModeShift person?
I thought it was a ModeShift person, but I'm not sure. And it might have just been as a student project. But they
Cool.
were trying to develop a map that would show safe routes for cyclists. And I don't know where that project has
That's
gone.
a great question. I have heard of some college groups looking specifically towards like safe routes for like downtown and stuff. But I haven't heard of that project. I am technically doing my own little side quest of kind of figuring that out. I'm following a woman in Ann Arbor who is doing biking to every single street in Ann Arbor in the city limits from A to Z. So I decided I wanted to try that out here as well. So I'm still in the A's, and I had some obstacles, and I'll see how much I can do during this cold time. But I'm planning to still see what I can do. And one of the reasons definitely is to see what the safer routes are. I know I'll be going on a lot of these main routes to get to these little side streets, but there's no way that it's going to be fully safe in all of the different spots, which is one reason why I want to check it out and see where we can improve. Because there is a lot of talk about bike lanes. And I don't know if there's any skeptics here. I feel like this is hopefully more of a welcoming crowd towards people trying to not use cars that are interested in biking. But I'm a huge advocate for, if you are adding more safer bike routes, there absolutely will be more people that are biking. Me included. I didn't used to, I wasn't able to safely get to PFC, for example, across town. I have to like awkwardly cross town until they put that protected bike lane right through the middle of downtown. I use that all the time, and I'm sure you've seen some of the discussion boards on that. But it's that kind of a thing is really, really helpful for connecting safely. And there's all sorts of urban planning things that you can dive into if you're also interested in that, because that's something I've been learning more and more about. One of the most recent discussions, someone posted a meme, basically infographic, I guess is better. It's funny. It's showing the most common ways that cars kill people in crosswalks. So setting aside the fact that crosswalks are a relatively new thing, and it's been to like basically shame someone for getting hurt if they're not walking in one. So I don't like the idea of crosswalks in general, but this was specifically, even people in crosswalks aren't always safe. And it showed 5 different ways that cars kill people by accident in crosswalks. And the discussion was like, hey, how do we figure out how to stop this from happening? Deaths by car are a huge category in every age group. So every age group that exists, I don't want to state a stat wrong, but in at least most of the age groups, they're in top 2, if not top 3, for cause of death. And always, I would say, I'm sure within the top 5. So it's a very important area that people usually just kind of don't want to talk about, because the convenience and car culture of what's expected in our society is basically like, I'm in a car. This is my vehicle to get to another spot, and it really psychologically shuts you off when you're in a car like that from the outside world a lot more. If you are walking, for example, or biking, you're so much more in the community. I know, sorry, sidetrack, but basically, I when I was biking to work, it was so nice to just be able to like say good morning or say hi, and that human connection is something that everyone needs. And who gets to do that on your commute to work if you're in a car? Like that's just it's the opposite. You're psychologically more boxed off. I'm a fan of using different words to try to think of the reality of it. So it can sound a little bold, but basically you're in a cage is one way of saying it, because that really is like what that does to you by doing that. So I think it'd be healthier for everyone to have options, to not constantly need to have that as something that you're in. So any other questions?
To get back to Steve and advocacy, does ModeShift really advocate for anything? For instance, bike racks at various
yeah.
places, so that there, when you go somewhere, you can actually do something with your bike besides worry about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, rider safety, so teaching people, especially new riders, about safety rules, about wearing bright clothing or something that's reflective, especially at night, in the evening. Do you have any kind of advocacy along those lines of
Yes.
helping?
Yeah. So one way that we advocate is through the city a lot. So if you're following city politics, there's always meetings for Imagine Kalamazoo, the master plan. They just kicked off the Imagine 2035 master plan, 10-year plan. So they're just discussing how to make things better. And we always talk like as a community saying like, hey, like, this is a good opportunity to show like why you think these different things are important, and definitely showing up in that kind of way is something that's encouraged, and something that we've been able to get really good results from. Bike racks specifically, I know definitely some local bike groups have done a lot of that. I think it's like Bike Friendly Kalamazoo does a little micro grants every I feel like twice a year, and I've seen some of those go towards bike racks and making sure there's a safe route. I know in city planning, they've put language into when a business is opening and stuff, for how many basically accessible bike racks need to be there too, is something they're working towards. A lot of those kinds of things are harder when it's about existing spots, but are there any, I would love to talk specifics. Are there any areas you can think of that you're like, oh, I don't feel like I would trust putting my bike there or whatever, that because there's not a good bike rack that you think would be helpful?
All of downtown?
Okay. Yeah, so I bike downtown quite a bit, and there's definitely bike racks, or like several of them sprinkled out, especially Kalamazoo Mall and the main strips. Sometimes if I feel like it's too far away, some businesses like fully accept you bringing your bike in with you. I'll give one example, Be Joyful. Like I was just trying to be really quick, and like the locking process was going to take too long. So I just like quick needed to grab something, and I asked ahead of time if it was okay if I just brought my bike in. So not the most ideal, but honestly, there is bike parking like right out front. Sometimes it's just about planning for enough time to do that as well. Um, yeah, so they also were doing a pilot program. I believe the city partnered with some people to do a pilot program for moving a bike rack around in different spots downtown for, I don't know if it was like a week or 2 weeks for each spot, because they were kind of trying to get an idea of where people wanted to put their bike. For me, that was weird because I didn't know when I could rely on it. So I think the only time I really utilized that is when they had some events at Bronson Park, and they had them down there. That was really helpful. Um, but yeah, using bike racks as like another barrier between the traffic and the sidewalk is one way that they were practicing that too, that I've seen other in urban planning in other cities that I like to follow. They're working on that too.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
when we create parking spaces, we can take one and make that into a bike rack, type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Mark?
So,
Back to the question of routes.
Hmm.
So Kalamazoo Township has a bicycle boulevard that is informally called the Westwood Wiggle, and it goes through Westwood north of West Main, but paralleling West Main because biking on West Main is taking your life into your hands.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
this is signed bike route, and it's there's no other infrastructure other than the signage, but it's on quieter neighborhood streets, and then it spans Westwood, but this makes me think, wouldn't it be great if we had a map, an online map of all of the routes? And we have other bicycle infrastructure in the township, but
Yeah.
it varies in at least in my perception of the quality.
I want to write this down, but I lost my pen all of a sudden. But oh, there it is. Okay. I definitely would love to follow up a little bit more on that because I don't know who was working on that one map project, but I love maps. So I will say one thing. I've biked two places on West Main and not gone on West Main because I do not want to do that. And so I'm not sure if I went on that one specifically or not. But when I got a little mount so that I could have GPS on my bike, and that if you're using the GPS, I love to set my phone to automatically be a bike route for how long I could expect it to be a bike route. And that's definitely taken me on similar paths, if not that exact one. So digitally that exists just via Google often. It's not perfect, but I've when I'm studying for my next like routes for my A to Z project, I'm looking ahead and seeing like what Google thinks the best bike route would be, and then just from my knowledge of it, I'm trying to see what I think would be the safest way to get to the different spots. So I'd challenge to definitely try it out on Google to see how good they are, but it would be really awesome to have um just better maps in general. One
It
other
would
thing
be nice if local folks could give input to Google, but
yes.
I don't think such a thing as that exists.
So I don't know if how much ModeShift was involved, but the city just did a love to ride a month-long like review of that kind of a thing. So they asked anyone that's bike commuting to basically have this app and it would automatically log when it knew you were biking, as long as you allowed it. So I let them have my GPS for the month. And that way you actually could write in suggestions. You could say, hey, did you feel safe here? Did you not? And so through that process, they are working on a map in that way as well. And that's through the city. The city like I don't know, basically was working on that for the 1 month, and then they're also using data for longer. Other cities use things like Strava as well. Strava is a way to map your ride that the city also could technically, there's like at least free versions that they can access to see general high traffic routes for biking to figure out where the most efficient places to add safer bike infrastructure are, because it is totally different to bike somewhere where you're safe versus not feeling safe.
Yeah,
Definitely.
well, I've had the thought it would be nice to have a collaboration between Portage, Kalamazoo City, Kalamazoo Township, Oshtemo, Comstock, which is basically the urban core of the county,
Mm-hmm.
and have it be a little bit broader than just the city.
Oh
But
yeah, definitely.
haven't been able to figure out a way to make that happen.
You're in the township, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I do know that city planning for City of Kalamazoo has had some discussion with Portage, and one of the gaps definitely is a good safe connection between the two. Nice. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Sorry, that's a link for bike friendly maps. I actually haven't used that one that much, but I have heard of that one. Friendly Kalamazoo. Okay, cool. Nice. Oop. And I will say to Comstock too, there's also a pretty awesome path. I've gone all the way to Riverside or River Oaks Park there because there's that huge protected bike lane, like the whole route from the one side of the city to there. It's a little bit of a bummer that they have a bunch of the little tiny stop signs at each little neighborhood crossing, and that's just again kind of putting responsibility on the cyclist instead of a car to stop before the crosswalk, because one huge issue with is cars not stopping behind the crosswalk. That's super dangerous for pedestrians, joggers, skateboarders, bikers. If a bicyclist is in like a sidewalk and crossing, which is why I also recommend to take the road for biking, because that's the safest way to do it. And making sure that cars are only able to pass if it's in a safe spot. I could talk about other infrastructure things. I guess one thing that ModeShift in general also is doing, there's a little group to work with the city a few different times that they set up schedules for doing a ride around, because for urban planning, for specifics to an area, it's really helpful to physically take part of either a walking tour or a cycling tour to know how it is safe for those areas and be able to point out problems. So one of them was during like a work day I couldn't do, but I basically did some screenshots of maps and said like, hey, like this doesn't connect well. Like for me to go to West Main, for example, from the Vine neighborhood, I can get there really easily, go up level, but to get back, I have to go all the way basically through the center of downtown to kind of do it in a safe way, because that level two-way track doesn't go to that section. So there's all sorts of different pieces that we're given what we have to try to work with it to make this better. But yeah.
You're
other-
on the ECC. Does that have anything, any say into the bike paths that they're building right now?
So ECC is basically to recommend things to the City Commission. We did have ModeShift, other people from ModeShift came to speak to ECC to give a presentation and kind of talk about what we're doing. But yeah, there's things that can be done, but it's mostly just recommending things specifically to the City Commission. They've kind of added because the sustainability plan has gone through. I mean, and it's all throughout all of the cities of what the goals are. It's already like in there as like a goal. So I think getting to doing specific tasks to make that achieved is the bigger thing at the moment, more so than advocacy, although advocacy is very important for making sure that I would say we stay on track for this, because there's so much negative feedback for a lot of these changes, and that's really wild to me. But I'll try to say like it's just our car culture definitely gets people so focused on the individual rights of a car versus the people that we all are at times as pedestrians, as people out there, not just in a cage. So definitely there's it's wild to not think of safety first to me, because we all are vulnerable at different times. As young children, you're really vulnerable with cars around. As you age, that you're vulnerable. There's all sorts of different ways, and just being a pedestrian, you're more vulnerable. And I think focusing on safety for people versus speed of cars, and it's proven that speed isn't even that long of a delay. Like they're doing tests to see how long these different delays are making it for cars. But the goal is to have less death for that.
Would you please remind us what ECC stands for And
Yeah,
it's
it's Environmental Concerns Committee with the city of Kalamazoo. So there's all sorts of boards, the Planning Commission, all sorts of different volunteer boards. So we're all volunteers. I'll be finishing out in just a couple months. So but it's open to the public. They're live streaming the meetings. It's ECC specifically is third Wednesday of the month, 4:30 till it's done. And yeah, we meet at City Hall and then recommend things to the city commission, and also have all sorts of different boards that we're like liaisons for and report back to kind of it's a great spot to learn about a lot of different local environmental things happening, basically, because there's people from all sorts of different categories of that, like this group kind of is. So
Okay. Dawn, you had a question?
Well, actually, just a comment, because I currently serve on the Portage Park boards, which is the subcommittee. We have a subcommittee, which is the bicycle committee. And it's really, I mean, I want to say that the director of the parks program is very active in expanding the trail system that Portage has. And one of the things that she was talking about is it's easier, or there are grants available to connect cities and townships and that type of thing. So they're really working right now. It looks like they're kind of inching towards Comstock Township with the trail system there, both off street, so actual, protected trails. And then if there's any, I know that if there's any street work being done, there's strong advocating for bike lanes if there isn't already bike lanes on the street. So Portage is really, really active in doing that. And I know that they've been connected with the city of Kalamazoo to try to make that more robust and safer for cyclists. So, and I just want to make a comment too, Sharon, I did not a whole year of cycling commuting, but I do agree with you that it was like I could say hello to people, and I was like constantly waving and like, tooting my little bell or whatever. And yeah, it's much that social connection is true. And it was a really great experience to be able to do that. But right now we have all of the construction and stuff, which has made it less safe. And I live in an area where I can't connect safely to one of my safe streets were under construction. So it's like I've not commuted as much this year, but hoping to get back at it.
yeah, that's definitely was a difficult thing. I recently switched to fully remote, so I don't have to bike commute anymore. I was hybrid, so I was biking 7 miles each way, and then switched to 6.5 miles each way once the construction was done at the most convenient spot. But yeah, construction always changing definitely does not always make that easy. I will say, is there anyone that could take, or I guess I want to talk about buses again for a second. One thing that I wish I had done way sooner is just explore the bus system and realize how really you can just be a part of the solution to be one less car on the road, by just trying to figure out what those sometimes those choices can be. And it's not ever all or nothing. I don't want anyone to feel bad if you have to drive different places. Like that's how it's set up, but challenge yourself and challenge the infrastructure we have to figure out how you can try to do it less and not have to do that for every single thing. And there's walking, busing, taking the bike, carpooling is also is shifting less cars off of the roads. But yeah, so for the bus, is there anyone that feels like they haven't explored that there's some kind of a barrier that's not making you want to? I'd be very curious to hear what those barriers are.
Well, for me, the biggest problem with the bus is what the bus calls the last mile. It's a mile away to get to the bus stop. And there's no sidewalks where I live. So that is one problem. The other problem I had when I was living closer to town was that the bus was a hub system and not a, and not a cross-town type of system. So I was on the CCTA and kept fighting about that because I said it would take me 15 minutes by car to get, for instance, to the Y. It was an hour and a half by bus. It's not exactly conducive to the use of the bus.
Yeah.
And so that those were the two biggest problems, is that all buses go to the hub instead of just, I'm used to bigger cities and not radius cities like this where you get off a bus and you got cross towns, and that last mile is a real problem, especially if there's no sidewalk.
Definitely,
So that's part of the concern there. We can't, it's not even really safe for my grandson because there's no sidewalk. At 12, at 5, my daughter was taking the bus in where we used to live, but here at 12, because there's no sidewalk, we don't want him walking to the bus,
Yeah. There's definitely a lot. That's the if it was bikeable, then the last mile can be like supplemented a little bit with that, but that's still hard if you don't have it. If it's not safe to be walkable, then it's probably also one of the streets that's not as safe for biking. But interesting. Okay, are there any other questions?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sharon, if you're not on Facebook, how do we engage with ModeShift?
That's hard. Definitely you'll see some events out in the community otherwise, but like potentially the Vine Neighborhood Association, but that's hard if none of you are in the Vine neighborhood as well. Technically we're on TikTok and maybe on Instagram. And
You also
that's
have a website.
yes, yeah, there's the website. So that's probably the best way to connect. I don't know how often they're updating it for like events on there, but if you're just interested, reaching out that way would probably be best if you're not on Facebook. But yeah, unfortunately, it's really vibrant Facebook discussions that I think have been really helpful. And one other thing for that is I've noticed city planning employees in our comments and reading the different discussions that we've had just between ourselves of issues that we've run into. And like I see them like liking people's comments too. Like it feels like they're listening and getting it and trying to work towards that, and having that feedback from the community is really helpful for their case for that. But yeah. Are you raising your hand as well?
Yes, Susan has her hand up.
Yeah. Susan?
Yes, thank you, Sharon. This is really important work. I take my bicycle as many places as I can. Two questions. First, I know there's national efforts to expand the use of public transit, bikes, e-bikes. We haven't really talked much about them. Yeah. And so one question is whether ModeShift is taking advantage of those resources and part of that larger effort where we can, get information about what's worked elsewhere, for example. And then second, right in town, I've heard that Bronson has good programs to encourage their employees to take alternative transport, including carpooling, public transit, and biking. And is there any effort to spread the word about that to other local businesses and organizations?
Yes. Yeah. So there's different things going on for that. That was a lot at once. I'm trying to remember how I was going to answer that.
Sorry.
There are tons of different groups doing it, and I kind of wanted to mention a few of them because if you're interested in this, you can follow these like national like groups throughout the country, I should say, that are doing different things. There's Pedestrian Dignity is one name. America Walks is an organization that focuses on walking. just like social media wise, there's people that talk about things like the happy urbanist. Um, and I just find that kind of stuff really interesting because it really shows where priorities are and where we could be if we want to focus on things like safety, um, and like encouraging positive encouragement towards reasons that people would want to choose not driving by car. Um, there's some really cool, if you're a map nerd, there's definitely some really cool people that go over maps in very specific areas, and then you can imagine like oh, that looks kind of like this street, like for how they show how they can adjust something that is existing in a unsafe way to make it better. So those things are really cool. And also Strong Towns is another large group that's growing that is constantly talking about these kinds of things too. And I haven't talked about a lot of the topics that ModeShift really does care about, like affordable housing, because all of these things are highly connected. And if we want a good, positive way to thrive in a climate change reality future, I think we really need to get serious about making it work for everybody, and not just focus on solutions that are achievable if you're wealthy enough. So there's some of those kinds of um, things that ModeShift's also probably going to get into a little bit more, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And you mentioned also in the chat the buses run only every half hour. So some of them are only every hour and some of them are every half hour. I was like excited the first time I took the Westnedge bus because I was like, oh my gosh, this is every half hour. Like I can like go to the store and then like not have to worry about that much. The really annoying thing with Westnedge is I don't know if you've heard of what a strode is. But basically it's a term, I think it was coined by the Strong Towns group a few years ago, and it's a combination of a street and a road. So it's basically it like something that moves traffic really fast and is really wide. Like Westnedge is like the worst example, I'd say. And it's just not a welcoming environment for walkability. So getting on the bus and going to Westnedge, you have to go so far from the stop to the business that you want to go to, and then usually figure out where the next light is to cross, because there's huge gaps between how long you have to walk for that, and then cross so many lanes, and hopefully people aren't turning and everything too, because there's not like it's not a really welcoming environment for walkability. But yeah, there's all sorts of cool lingo for urban planning if you follow this kind of stuff enough, for sure.
You just pointed out one of the problems to the roads I hadn't read about, the width of crossing the road at the crosswalk, which
That's
is
a very important thing to think about. And yeah,
right.
when I started thinking about it that way, it's really crazy. That's one of the bigger reasons. Think about someone that has to move slow. Moving slow over a huge distance, you're way more vulnerable. If you have shorter crossings, then you're way safer as a pedestrian. Also, the psychological effect of narrowing a road makes cars automatically drive slower. Um, there's so much psychology behind urban planning, and we've really been seeing a shift everywhere of how to try to make that safer, um, because they've just realized that we focused on car so much that like we've messed up a lot of things, and now we really need to get into fixing those things for people. But
Downtown, they've added a light for bicycles to turn, and the cars still have a red light. Has that helped the situation, A, and B, do you know if there's plans to do that with other crosswalks?
So I have mixed feelings about how that's been implemented. There was a bike ride planned for towards the beginning of when that was opened, and at the end they took notes basically to hand to the city in like a stack of papers for like what we didn't like or what we did like about that. And they have since then already made adjustments. I'd say there's a few more adjustments that could make that even better. And some of it doesn't make super sense to me. I would rather see probably cyclists and pedestrians going at the same time, as long as it's clear to cyclists that like pedestrians are always first. Like the priority of like who needs to be most careful is like pedestrians should be able to have where they need to go, then bikes basically, then cars after that. So like I don't know if that makes sense, but I think people are typically pretty good about that. But some of the timing doesn't make sense, and I know it's really expensive to do those, so I'm not sure what their plan is for all of that. But I know, I mean, changing those one ways into two ways, there's been a lot of pains along the way, and there will be more pains. But I do feel like the final plan from what I've seen is getting way better for focusing on safety. And one of the ways they call that, the city calls it complete streets, and it's vision zero. It's the goal of no death basically, because we keep seeing more and more death by car, and we need the roads to help get that down. So we only have like 7 minutes left. So are there any other questions?
Traffic circles.
Mixed feelings. So one thing, it's hard to say like how about this thing, because everything I feel like matters for the context that it's in. And that's why there's so much to learn about urban planning, because there's traffic circles should be safer, and they are a lot of places, but I don't feel like that's always the case, for depending on where it's implemented. So, and then there's also traffic circles that focus on pedestrians as having the right of way. But for example, the 2 traffic circles on Sprinkle Road over the highway, I do not want to bike there. I do not want to walk there. That is so unsafe feeling. I don't even like driving through there. I used to have to pretty much for work. So mixed feelings about traffic circles. I don't know which way you wanted to go with that, but a lot of places they can be a way safer way to go about things. But I encourage also just hopping in the ModeShift discussion group on Facebook if you're on Facebook, just to, even if you're.
So how do you get to it? Is it Kalamazoo ModeShift? Is it ModeShift?
Yeah, it should be Kalamazoo ModeShift. I'll double check
Okay.
how it's said, but I think there's 2 different groups. Technically, there's a discussion group, and that one's mostly focused more on people that are more aware, I guess, a little bit, but anyone's welcome, absolutely. ModeShift Kalamazoo general discussion group, and then there's just ModeShift Kalamazoo page, but the discussion groups where that real like community is. I'm constantly we're always constantly talking about different solutions and problems, and I think in general it feels a lot of times like a positive environment.
So thank you for your time.